So recently, I was randomly given access to a playtest I had signed up for probably a couple years ago at this point. Now, I've been playing Foxhole off and on since it did pre release public testing about a decade ago. And despite my reservations with what the game has sort of turned into over that decade, I wasn't sufficiently turned off from trying their new multiplayer wargame project, Anvil Empires. Now, I am required to say that this is a pre alpha build of the game, so there is still a lot of work left to be done, and it does show. The balance is also, it's not quite there yet. This is a true pre-alpha, though, and since it follows in the footsteps of Foxhole, from a technological perspective, any issues or incompleteness are largely centered around assets, systems, and balance, rather than being issues with game instability. Anvil Empires takes after the general concept of Foxhole, an isometric perspective, player driven war industry, and war logistics game where the players grind resources to build weapons, transport them to where they need to go, and use them to fight the enemy faction. Except this time we've gone fully medieval. Basic principles are pretty familiar to Foxhole with some big deviations. You pick one of the three factions, you spawn into an auxiliary character in a town, and you get a little tutorial, pick up sticks and stones, break wildlife's bones, and, the usual stuff. Make axes, chop wood, break up stones, rent or build a homestead, do some industry, make some more things, take animal trophies, turn them into the bounty board for silver, pay for homestead rentals or homestead taxes, buy things on the market. Most importantly, get your avatars. All of that is fairly run-of-the-mill gameplay progression stuff, but the avatar system is actually pretty interesting. Avatars are trainable characters with different upper limits on various skills, so you can buy an untrained avatar with a focus on melee combat who can train up to, 10 in fitness and 9 in melee, but maybe only goes up to 3 in blacksmithing. It's stuff like that. Or for some extra silver, you can get an avatar that has some pre-trained skills, so maybe they have a 4 in ranged combat to start. You can swap between these avatars pretty freely, but you do have to make sure they are kept well fed with non-perishable cooked food items, either in their inventory or in like a homestead or a town inventory. These avatars are stored in homesteads, fortresses, or towns when not in use, and then you can inhabit them when needed. The avatar system is actually quite interesting, since it allows players to have multiple characters with different specializations, and then switch between them. So, if you want to do some blacksmithing, but you're in your archer character, you can just put your archer back in the closet and wear your blacksmith out on the town. Simple and elegant. And then when these avatars are inevitably defeated in combat, they do drop their items, but the avatar itself leaves a body behind, which can be recovered either by you or by players in your faction, and then returned to the nearest structure to heal. The aforementioned auxiliary character also acts as a sort of starter or disposable combat character with a skill maximum of 1 in all skills. These are basically your peasant warriors being drafted en masse for military operations or regional defense as needed when a call to arms is called. They're stocked in the hundreds along with the equipment by players in your faction, and are largely treated as the medieval equivalent of a human wave doctrine. They're fodder for quick military responses, providing an accessible way for players to do PvP or other activities without needing to commit an avatar and equipment to it. So with this system, you're actually getting a lot of advantages. You can specialize across multiple functions with a single account and on the fly, and you can do PvP or PvE activities without needing to commit your own resources in a full looting environment. That really solves a lot of problems. And in retrospect, I guess it's a lot like the Scav and PMC system in Tarkov, but on a much broader scale. And although the game clearly still has a lot of growth to do, I can honestly say that playing it, I do kind of see the vision for Anvil Empires. There's a certain magic to either sieging or being sieged, playing fearlessly with auxiliary troops, and then eventually getting to the point where you can one-shot oxes with a longbow. And although there were certainly some balance issues for auxiliaries compared to the highest tier of equipment, and the not highest tier of equipment compared to the highest tier of equipment, man with spear is still the greatest foe of man on horse. If you can knock them down, friendly players and fully kitted avatars can always finish the job for you. So, pre-alpha balance aside, there's still ways for you to sort of be useful in an auxiliary when your opponents are a clan of heavily armored murder hobos capable of deflecting 1,000 arrows. Hey, it's a pre-alpha, what'd you expect? On the home front side of things, homesteads and homestead renting is a rather interesting system in and of itself. Homesteads are basically player-built houses where you can store items and create various kinds of industrial tools to refine resources or to produce items, which you need to craft weapons, armors, and tools. They're also split into town homesteads and wild homesteads, with the former being primarily focused on things like blacksmithing and the latter being more about farming and hunting. There's also a rental system which allows you to create homesteads with a per day price for allowing other players in your faction to use the equipment you've set up for a fee. So you can have a blacksmithing homestead in a town that charges 8 silver for 24 hours of access to forges and auto hammer anvils. This system shifts solo players and smaller groups away from needing to or feeling like they need to make their own homesteads by giving them the ability to pay a small fee for access to all of the equipment they need to make anything they want. It's an actually clever system for reining in building spam on the map, coupled with the very, very high taxes for running a homestead. It's inconvenient, but it is a legitimate issue to be solved because there is limited space in games like this, and if everybody coats the entire map in like 3x3 boxes, then you start to run into some problems. And the system is far more generous than facilities in Foxhole, where it's actually fairly accessible, and you really can get away if you're just a solo or you have like a really small group of players and you don't need to make a lot of items at large scale. You can easily get away with doing rentals and buying off market and doing all that stuff and not really feel the damage of not being able to have your own homestead. During my playtest of the game, I personally was playing solo, and I didn't really have any problems using the rental system other than it was a little bit hard to find wild homesteads, but that's like a map UI problem that's easy to solve and not like a huge existential problem. So in the end, it didn't feel like solo players were detrimented in any significant way. You could still get full progression at the cost of just missing out on the grind of a homestead experience. And it does mean that less homesteads are needed overall, so it's not just wall-to-wall medieval compounds. And this is an area of the game where I expect there's probably going to be a lot of changes when it comes to how much a homestead should cost. Also, the whole homesteads and castle things looks pretty nice. It's quaint. I like it.
They got a heavy ram. Get the fire.
Since it's a pre-alpha, I don't really have too much to say overall except my general impression of the concept as a whole, which was actually pretty positive. I think that the developer Siege Camp learned a lot of lessons from Foxhole going into this, and I do look forward to seeing where it goes. But I will say that given their tumultuous development of Foxhole, I am forced to also wonder if they actually have the ability to balance the game out well. If Anvil Empires sounds interesting, consider signing up for the playtest on Steam and keeping an eye on it with me to see where it ends up. I think this game could genuinely have a bright future. Like I said at the beginning, though, this is a pre-alpha, so there's definitely a lot that's going to be changed and a lot that still needs to be added. Probably the core mechanics are locked in, but honestly, those could even change quite a lot too. Anyways, that's all I really have to say about Anvil Empires for the moment. If you liked this, then you know what you need to do.
What the hell?